Hi, I'm Mikey, and this is Tyler, and we're the founders of Innovative Start Organization. And yes, we are here to talk about all things financial literacy. Obviously, in our recordings, we like to talk about financial and economic related topics. Um, this recording, we got some really good hitters. It's going to keep you really informed, especially for our younger demographic. Obviously, we try to make sure we touch base on a lot of topics that apply to everybody, but also give you insight and just information. Our goal is to inform, not persuade. So just to touch on the three topics that we'll be hitting today, one of the biggest ones that just came out recently as the date of this recording, which is the 20th of February, is about the tariffs and the recent strike down from basically the Supreme Court. And then we'll jump into some other things that are extremely important for our recent grads slash young adults, which that being the unemployment rate or underemployment, and then also some of the debt traps that I would say younger generations, younger people are falling into. So, yeah, we'll just jump off into the first one. So essentially, there was a ruling 63 in the Supreme Court that struck down the economy's emergency global tariffs. So the recent administration had this thing that they were trying to push as far as like a bunch of tariffs. We've talked about tariffs and plenty videos. You can scroll back, but just to give you a quick, synopsis of what a tariff is, it's a tax on goods. And it can be from either side, whether it's the country importing or exporting. It raises prices in a sense because companies are going to look to get their money back or make their money back from those tariffs. Tariffs are supposed to boost the economy on whoever is applying them, right? Because you're getting money from that company or country, and then you'll use that for your federal funds, quote unquote. Anything you want to add to that before we jump into it, as far as tariffs, Tyler? But yeah, so one of the biggest things too is right. The most important part of it um, is prices on those imported goods. Right, this is the country that is bringing the goods in, imported, exporters. If we do that, right? So just to give another quick synopsis on that. But yeah, so imported goods that could be anything from like food to industry things like precious metals and cars and clothes, anything, right? If you shop on Shein, things like that, like just anything that you think of that's coming from another country. If it's made in somewhere else that doesn't say the USA, it probably was imported. So not even a problem. But yeah, really, the most important part of that, right, is pricing, right? So if the case is if the current administration was able to implement those tariffs, that would change the pricing dynamic across all of those goods that I just discussed. And what you would look at, right, if it was an increased tariff on a country for those goods being imported in, you're looking at, a significant increase in that price on whatever that is. And it can be minimal, but it can add up. But yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Tyler.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to, there's a lot of politics in this. To be honest with you, news, um, one thing we don't like to persuade, like we like to stick to the facts. So I, by the time this comes out, I encourage everyone to do some research. It looks like the current administration is going to try to re-up the tariffs by 10%, I believe, under a new law or a new act, I think is the right terminology. So I encourage you all to research that. I do not think that the current administration is going to give this up. Um, and so this will be interesting to see what happens. I will say that it is, important to note our goods from going to other countries are tariffed quite a bit. I know there's also some interesting things when it comes to like any of the people that love cars. Like there's certain things that we allow and don't allow, certain cars coming over here and don't, because that competes with our ours in the United States car industry. Um, Not saying it's right or wrong. Again, there's just a lot of nuances here that we encourage everyone to do some research on. But there are some people as well that say that only Congress, they see this as a tax and only Congress can tax. And so that is another interesting layer to all of this. but I'm curious to see how, like, if there's to be refunds, how do these refunds go out? Um, and some are saying that this, because of the tariffs, prices
Mm,
were increased on goods, and ultimately, some of those price increases were not all eaten by the businesses, they were eaten by American citizens.
mhm.
So if the businesses get refunds, but the American citizens still paid the higher prices, like you said, am I explaining that well, Mikey? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a really interesting, unfortunate
Mm.
dynamic that is to be played out.
Yeah, and I think another big thing too is this is where people get, upset about corporate bailouts, right? Like, if you look at the last recession and a lot of those banks got bailed out. This is another aspect where it's like, where does the consumer fall into this, right? Corporations, in a certain sense, when it comes to things, are also supposed to be tried and viewed as a human, essentially. So, as a person, right? They can't be bigger than the person themselves. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting how it plays out. I think there's going to be a lot of uproar and kickback because I think it was in the billions that they were going to be trying to refund these large corporations that it impacted. So as a consumer, right, they've already if that business wasn't impacted by any of that because they raised prices or whatever. This is basically free lunch, as people would say. So please pay close attention to that. It's an extremely important thing to look at. Also look at the businesses, if they're getting a kickback, or they also a business that also, raise their prices, or they can continue to have those set prices, or they're going to reel it back in based off of all this information, what that looks like. So, um, obviously, when a company becomes public and they're publicly traded, private equity, there's a lot of things that go into why businesses are always looking to up a profit. And so you'll have like small businesses or new business models that look at the perspective of, how do we make sure that we stay and hold our ground? So things you can think of is like the Costco hot dog. You can look at Arizona iced tea, things like that, where it doesn't matter how, the economy works. They try to stay true to their original business mission and things like that. So look at those corporations, look how they play out as far as like, what everything is finally said and done and in ink. But yeah, jumping into our next piece here, we're talking about the grad recession. So some really big things if you really paid attention and as if you're a recent grad or graduating in the last, I guess, 2 to 3 years, it's just the ability to get a job. Now, unemployment and underemployment are two different things, right? To be unemployed means that you don't have a job, regardless of if that job is in your profession or whatever it is, right? That means, no matter what you're doing, you don't have something that is paying you essentially, that you're not working. So, underemployment is the fact that you could have a degree, you can have a specialty, but you're not working in that field, right? You could be working another job or whatever that is. And it's extremely important because unemployment can tell you one thing because it can the unemployment rate could be low for a certain age demographic, but that does not mean that those people in that demographic are actually working jobs that are what they studied or what they got their specialty in. So underemployment is a really good deeper dive to take a look at, are these students who, receive these degrees also getting jobs that are in that field. One of the things you'll hear as far as like gripes with older generations and sometimes within the current generation is that you paid so much for a degree, but the job that you want to get, whether that's the job that you studied for or the job that you just end up getting, right, is not paying that back, right? So whether that it took you 20 to 50 to 100K, right, to get the degree, and then you get a job and it's only paying you 50 to 60K a year, right? That creates a trap, the interest rates, and yada yada, which is going to jump into our third topic once we get into that. So yeah, so essentially, um, if you're looking at unemployment rates, they stay pretty steady at 5.5%. As again, this is going back to what I was talking about. Essentially, if you're looking at just unemployment, right, these are just people within this 20 to 24 year old age range. that just have a job, right? They could be a barista, they could be employed in the thing that they study, it could be anything, right? They're just employed. So 5.5% might not seem like a lot because you're like, okay, that's pretty minimal, right? When you're looking at people who are underemployed, and again, these are people who are working in a field that is not the case, that surged to over 40% for some of those professions. So that means that somewhere up to 40% of certain job descriptions or roles are seeing, not the same output as far as those people working in those degree fields or specialty fields or whatever it is. So yeah, so just a major thing to take a look at, major thing to also see, the difference between the two. But Tyler, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a maybe a hot take than what is normal right now. I I think we should love what we do, but that may not be till later in life they're able to do that. I think sometimes we have to have a job to make money, and sometimes that's life's hard. It's gonna be hard in certain situations, and it's hard to save money, but it's also hard not having any money. So um, I say all that to say I am a real fan of going to school for really applicable jobs that pay well and that are steady. And they may not be the most sexy jobs or what we love to do, but I encourage, maybe you can do that later on in your career. That's just me. I, I'm There are some certain college degrees that I do not think really have a lot of job opportunities, for lack of better words, after college. Now, we can go on if that's right or wrong. That's a whole nother debate, but I think that does play into this underemployed 40%, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
Um, and, we need a lot of plumbers, electricians, teachers.
Hmm.
You know, there's some gaps, and unfortunately, I don't think whether that's in college or before college, we're encouraged to really look at where the gaps are,
Hmm.
and it's just something to be aware of. And it's hard, right? Like this brings in the type of economy we live in and things like that. But I just encourage everyone to have that dialogue with themselves. If you're very interested, maybe you work somewhere and it's not the greatest thing you provide for yourself, your family, whoever that may be. If you have things you're passionate about, you go and you serve in your other time, or you give um, your skills to that, whatever that cause is.
Yeah, right. No, I think as far as like also overall, one of the big things that you can take a look at too is, you know, in a giving setting, BLS.gov has job trends. Please take a look at that before you pursue anything, right? Whether you're going to trade, you're going to a 2 year, 4 year master's, whatever it is. Let's look at, the job that you want based off of the degree that you're getting. You can see how much they're paying, if there's increases in there, if there's expected fall offs, whatever it is, right? And it's really tricky now because for certain positions, right? Not all, but for certain positions, technology is playing a huge part on the job outlook. So that's something to just keep up with. Always be paying attention. If you're in college right now, you have time to pivot, right? But if you spent that time, you did your 4 years or whatever that looks like, and then you have your degree because you went for what you're passionate for versus what was more guaranteed. Now, when I say more guaranteed, I'm not saying absolute, but you would have a higher chance at getting or being placed into a role that pays for one, the degree that you received, and then two, for the lifestyle you want to live. And I think that's extremely important. I think for the younger generation now, it's harder because I feel like there's a lot of factors. I think just socially wise, things have changed with social media and everything else that makes working seem like a little dead end. So there's a lot of pushback from Gen Z, and a lot of older people will tell you that it's like they're a difficult group to work with, but it's just that they don't really have that put your head down, work hard kind of mentality. They want results now, so. And I feel like that's everybody, but it just really takes a generation to do so. But yes, please pay attention to that because what happens is that there will be a bottleneck for the position that you're going for, right? And if when you're looking at the job outlook too as well, look at the area, look at everything else because, if you're in Silicon Valley and you're becoming a software engineer or whatever else, right? Everybody is. So look at where it is, look at where you can, be the strongest at, and then you don't always have to be passionate at it. I'm gonna tell you right now, I was not passionate in accounting, but I did it anyway. So, but this is just things to think of. But yeah, and that kind of falls into our next topic, which is also related around the same, I guess, age group, just in general, Gen Z. But there's now reports that show 40% of Gen Z adults are now carrying a credit balance from month to month. What that means is they're not fully paying off their credit cards, right? One of the biggest, I guess, tropes or whatever you can think of as far as when it comes to having a credit card is making sure your balance is paid off before the next billing cycle. What happens is that one impacts your credit score, impacts, and that's because either you pay late or your utilization or whatever that looks like. The average balance is around $3,500, which, may not seem like a lot if you're someone that feels like a high earner, or you don't have a lot of dependencies or whatever that looks like, your expenses are not that high. Or maybe, that's not a significant amount of your paycheck, but that adds up, right? When you look at, APRs and all that stuff like that, those interest rates that credit cards charge, you're anywhere between 20 and 30%, right? And so they take that balance and then that's charged 30%. And then if you're not paying the 30% plus some, you're just going to keep racking that up every single time. So you might have a minimum balance on your credit card that you can pay. And you might say, like, oh, yeah, like this is good enough. But at the same time, you just need to, if you can, pay the whole balance. And another thing is credit cards are emergency use only in that sense. You shouldn't be doing your most of your spending on a credit card, especially if you don't have the money, actual money, also debits essentially to pay it off, right? So that's one of the biggest things. If you're going to use it, just make sure that you pay attention to or manage your money wisely to where you can pay it off at the end. But if you're using it to sustain a lifestyle that you can afford, then that's something that you just need to, take another look at as far as your budgeting standards and what you need in life versus what you want. It does not help that a lot of things are predatory now when it comes to just putting a lot of people in debt, whether that's having a 17 to 18-year olds sign up for student loans, whether that's, providing you financing for small purchases with high interest rates. Like there's a lot of options. And even when it gets to gambling, like some platforms allow you to use your credit card instead of actual money that you have. So you can just rack it up. And especially if you have habits, it makes it a lot harder. So uh, again, kind of like the biggest takeaway, that minimum payment aspect, right? You may be like, oh, I can just pay this, right? That only impacts one of the major five. And when I say that, those are the things that impact your credit score the most, right? And that's on time payments. As long as you pay it, minimum payment, $2, $3 or whatever it is, right? That's only one aspect, but your utilization, the balance that you're carrying over month to month is going to really impact, right, your credit score, and that's going to be extremely important to do. So if you're somebody that's racking up and you're like, I can't get out of this, look at some debt consolidation and regroup, right? If you're going to consolidate your debt, make sure that you don't repeat the same practices or you're just going to be doing it over and over and building up the same, um, I guess, debt trap. But pass it over to you, Tyler, and I'll ramble on about that a little.
Yeah, all I have to say is, I mean, in your notes, you mentioned a good point, like the envelope system. So like, however much money you make each month, just put in an envelope, or you do like food envelope, restaurant envelope, groceries envelope, gas envelope, and you just carry that in your car. Because that is one thing. There is a study like it's easier to swipe your card than it is to give cash because you physically see the cash. So
Mhm.
just something to be aware of, and yeah, again, like needs versus wants. I'll just emphasize that. Man, I want a lot of things. I want a car, another car. I want this phone, I want these clothes, and the psychology of humans is what's really interesting is every time we get a new phone or whatever, we're excited for that first few days, and then it becomes so normalized. And so I don't know, maybe we can think of like, hey, do I, what have I been wanting that I don't really need? Um, and then as you work harder, you get bonuses or you start saving, you start to treat yourself a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, so that's just something to really think about as well.
Yeah, and one more thing as we wrap up on this, is that, wants versus needs and importance is the most like silly thing to, I guess, discuss in that sense because it can be taught at any level, but it's extremely important because I think people lose the aspect. Instant gratification is a killer, and that's what plays into your wants. You get that, and then you buy whatever, and you're like, okay, you're satisfied for now, but at the time, once it's all said and done, and then you look at it and you're like, wait a minute, like I didn't really need that, or it wasn't all it was hyped up to be. Now you just, burned yourself out of, putting yourself into debt or spending money that you didn't have, right? Some people that have like habits, right, whether that's, whatever vice that is, gambling or whatnot, um, it can be in that sense too, as far as like it's playing into your gratification, right? You win or you lose, you always look at the next time that you can get instant gratification. And that's just how humans are built. Dopamine rushes, all of that stuff really gets to you. But delayed gratification is also extremely important, and that's where those needs fall into, right? So if you save up, you'll get to what you need to, and it'll be better. It gives you more time to think on it. It gives you more time to appreciate it more. That is what's extremely important because if it's something that you want, really look at it, right? Whenever I want something, I look at it from a short term perspective and a long term perspective. Um, is that going to be something that's long term? Then that's something that I might need if it's something that's going to change my life or anything like that. If it's something that's short term, right? That's where I get into is it a want essentially? Is it something that I actually have to have right now? Probably not. But yeah, I would just say like really look at it. You it is now is the moment to be really, really, really engaged with your finances and your budgeting because you don't know what the outcome of the future will look like for, job stability, and just how much everything will cost, right? So it's better to always, 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 always one to be paying attention to, these financial and economic news pieces, but two, you know, what are your plans, right? If you live presently, you also need to also think about, your future self. Your present decisions are also going to impact you in the future. So those are just two aspects because obviously the past has already played a part, it's already done, but you can make the decision of, do you make that purchase? Do you buy this? Do you finance this? Right? And how that has impacted you 3 months, 6 months, a year, or 5 years. But extremely important those aspects, um, just to think of. But anything from you, Tyler, before we wrap up? All right. Well, we appreciate you guys. Take a look at us on all platforms. Again, we've been trying to make a great push and just get our voices heard and also get feedback from you guys. So this video obviously is recorded on the 20th, and just take a look at that. We'll be on the on YouTube, and then we'll also be on Spotify and Apple for you guys to check out. But let us know what you guys think of the topics that we talked about in the comments below. And yeah, we'll catch you all the next time. See you.